Well, hello. Daryl Black here. Just a bit of a last minute planned live for everyone. So right now I'm going live to public Facebook page, YouTube, and our Lead from the Inside Out group. I won't take a ton of time here tonight, but I've been talking to a lot of people about my transformational leadership program that's starting February 22nd. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second here. But one of the modules or one of the weeks is dedicated to habits, and specifically breaking habits and the importance of habits. And it's received quite a bit of interest in that, it's not something that's typically part of any program that I know of, particularly around leadership. So I want to take just a few minutes. So tonight I'm going to go through a very quick presentation, introduce a model or a method that will allow you to break habits. I'll do a quick review on the 3 secrets to remaining confident and calm in high pressure situations. So that was a masterclass that I did a couple nights ago. So that, again, that'll just be a quick summary, and then I'll talk about the transformational leadership program. Now, using a new piece of tech here, so this should be interesting. It's called StreamYard. If you wouldn't mind, if you're watching live here, can you just pop in with a comment? Just say where you're from, because depending on the platform. So if you're from Lead from the Inside Out, the private Facebook group, I actually can't see who you are for permissions and stuff like that. But if you're on YouTube or a public Facebook group or page or Exigent, I can certainly see comments. In fact, I'm going to leave something here, and then we'll get into the details. All right, so let's dive into this. Okay, is that going to work properly? There we go. Okay, excellent. All right, so habits. There is a particular reason I have this picture up, and it's of a vintage airplane and pilot. And the reason being is because where do habits actually come from? Well, what we now know is that habits are actually brain-based. And by that, we mean there's multiple parts of your brain. There's the prefrontal cortex, which we all are familiar with, and that's that CEO part of our brain. That's the most developed in humans. But that's what separates us from most other animals. So there's that part. There's the middle part of the brain, which we call limbic brain. That's the emotional part of the brain. But at the core, we have what we call a primitive brain or a lizard brain. And actually, one of the reasons that we aren't able to change habits very easily is because we're approaching it wrong, but we'll talk about that. So habits are actually formed and created and reinforced in the lizard part of the brain. And the reason for that is because that is the longest, that is the part of our brain that's been around the longest. And it's where really our survival, fight, flight, basic bodily functions, all of that stuff lives in that part of our brain. Now, what's important to recognize, and the reason I use this particular picture is because that part of the brain is extremely primitive and extremely straightforward. So it is the oldest part of our brain, and it's responsible for keeping us alive. So when habits are formed, they're not actually formed in the prefrontal cortex. They actually become part of our lizard brain. And here's the interesting thing is that it doesn't really matter if the habit serves us well or not. The lizard brain, the primitive part of the brain, really doesn't have an opinion on anything. It just kind of is. It's like I have the analogy, or use the analogy often, of a circuit board, right? Where it's kind of hardwired a little bit. Now, granted, we can make some changes, and that's the good news, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that's where our habits live, in the most primitive part of our brain. And as I said, this part of the brain doesn't decide what's good and what's bad. It just is. So that's why we continue to do things that just don't serve us well, because they're a habit. And you can say, man, it's a bad habit. I just can't break it. Well, that makes complete sense. That's totally legit, um, because that's true. That's true. It habits are difficult to break. But the good news is there is a method I'm going to introduce to you that's super simple. And as you guys know, I'm all about practical wisdom and tactics and all of those types of things. So again, let's dive right into it. So what do we get wrong? Well, we approach it from the prefrontal cortex that says we have a bad habit, right? Or we want to adopt a good habit. So that's that prefrontal cortex. And it makes complete sense to our mind, right? To our analytical mind. It says, yeah, if I'm overweight, I should break the habit of comfort eating. Or if I'm out of shape, then I should get into the habit of exercising more. Or I mean, frankly, a lot of people too, there's a habit of being uncomfortable or being in discomfort. And then that becomes actually a habit. So if people are in abusive relationships or situations that by all accounts on the outside would be like, change that. That makes no sense. Well, that's because we're coming at it wrong, coming from the outside in. So what we have to actually do is attack it from the inside out and really just kind of rewire through reinforcement, but the proper reinforcement, rewire the lizard part of our brain. Because the good news is it will respond to whatever thoughts we put into it, provided it's done in a particular way. And so that is the key point, though. There is a particular way that we can change our habits more effectively. So we approach it from the prefrontal cortex in, but it's actually that core right here that we have to hit on if we want to change habits. So I'm going to give you a turn method. Okay, it's going to be a turn method. So TURN. The first step is the trigger, right? So I'll talk about what it looks like. So the trigger is another word for it is cue, right? So a trigger could be something like I'm uncomfortable. That triggers uncomfortable eating or eating, right? Or trigger could be you're on a coffee break, so that means you immediately light up a dart. Or you wake up. Here's one that's very, very popular. You wake up and you reach for your phone and you start scrolling through Facebook and things like that. I fully support that if you're checking out my Facebook page and my Instagram, but otherwise, it's probably a bad habit. Or you come home, you grab a beer or whatever it might be. So everything starts with the trigger. And that's now where this subconscious, this lizard part of the brain, it sees the trigger. It's A or B. It just is or it isn't a trigger. And it starts, now we start the cascade of the habit. So first thing we have to do is figure out what that trigger is. And it's actually not that difficult. The next thing is urge, right? So there's the trigger, and what the trigger does is it triggers an urge, or another way of putting it is a craving. So I get home from a hard day at work. The habit is I have an urge to grab a beer or pour a glass of wine or phone somebody or whatever it might be, right? So you have the trigger, you have the urge now, or a cue and a craving. Okay, now here's the thing though, is it's actually wired, right? This is the circuit board of our brain. This is how it's actually wired. So the trigger happens, and then that will now create a craving. So this is now where we can start to do things about it. So we identify what the trigger is. There is going to be an urge associated with it. So how do we break the habit? Well, remove the voice. And what I mean by this is there's different ways of looking at this, but the way it's been explained to me best and the way I have researched it is there is like a habit voice or an inner dialogue that happens. Like, for instance, I keep using beer for some reason. The trigger is hard day at work. The urge is, the beer. And so then there's an inner dialogue or a habit voice that says, yeah, you know what? I need a beer or I need a drink. So that's that voice. And if when in the transformational leadership program, we'll take a deeper dive at this, but essentially the remove the voice part is removing that dialogue. And if you want to go so far as to name that inner voice, and here's what's happening is it's actually your lizard brain, your subconscious talking to you, right? It says, okay, we've got this trigger, we have an urge now to do something, and then here's that inner dialogue that happens. And as I said, if you really want to be breaking habits, name that habit voice, right? Name that habit voice. And so the other way of thinking about removing the voice is dismiss, right? Dismiss that voice, remove that voice, because there will be some sort of an inner dialogue there that says, yeah, I need a beer, for example, or I should check Facebook, right? So how about we'll do that. So the trigger is you've got some downtime. The urge is now I just have a feeling I should grab my phone. But the voice is, okay, I wonder what's going on Facebook. You go through there. So the idea is you need to dismiss that. You need to remove that voice. Now, it's kind of like, and you need to, the next part is really, really important, because if you've ever heard of that saying about don't think about a pink elephant, for example. So if I would say right now, don't think about a pink elephant. Well, of course, that's all you're going to be thinking about. So if all you're thinking about is that habit voice or breaking the habit, it's only going to reinforce, it's not going to help. It's not going to help. So what you have to do is you have to now have a new focus, okay? A new focus, or shift your attention. So what that is change your attention. Maybe go to an attitude of gratitude. Think about something that you're grateful for, or divert your attention entirely, because your subconscious is just serving things up. That's all it's doing. It's not deciding in, kind of this prefrontal cortex way of what's important and what isn't. It's just merely following the programming, and it's autopilot, right? That very first picture I showed you, it was of an aircraft and a pilot, because habits are autopilot. It's not conscious decision making. So when we're trying to break it and we're using decisions, prefrontal cortex, it's not going to work. So what we have to do is we have to kind of, in a way, trick the lizard brain into not continuing to reinforce that habit. And that's where we shift. So again, we want to trigger. So we identify what that trigger is. So I'm on a break. So that's the trigger. That's the cue. Then we have the urge. So what is that craving? So then, I have a break. I'm going to check Facebook. And then that inner dialogue, what we call the habit voice. And as I said, you can name it. And I have a name for mine, because it's actually doing a good job. Like it's doing what it's supposed to do. So you want to thank it, like, hey, dude, thanks, or dudette, thanks for that. But you want to dismiss it, and then you create a new focus, or you shift your attention. Very, very important. And you can do that every single time you come across a habit. But I do have to warn you, one of the things that we get wrong as well is we try to go too big too fast. The lizard brain it's not easy to rewire it. So an extreme example would be if you want to create a good habit, and that's another process that we dive into in TLP, but we have to start really, really small. And we've probably have heard that cliche before, but anyways, so I would strongly suggest that you take up turn, the trigger, the urge, remove the voice, and a new focus. Try that. And the one habit that I broke was checking my phone when I wake up. So you wake up, so that's a trigger. The urge is to reach for your phone. So then you remove that voice. It's like, hey, no, thanks, habit voice. I appreciate that. And then you divert your attention. So maybe you get up, you brush your teeth, or something like that. So that's the turn method of habit breaking. So I have a little catchphrase: take a turn so you can break bad habits. So the turn is the trigger, the urge, the remove voice, and focus there as well. Now, and I'd encourage you, if you have any questions, leave them in the Facebook group in particular, or anywhere for that matter, and I'll pop in and answer. So that is just a real quick rundown on habits and how we can start to break a habit using the turn method. Well, I'm going to do a quick summary of what the masterclass was on remaining calm and confident in high pressure situations, high pressure leadership situations. So the first one is be aware and change your leadership presence. So what we're talking about here is as a leader, from a leadership perspective, it's really, really important that we pay real close attention to our demeanor and the energy that we're giving off. And we need to be very, very aware of how we are sounding to other people. We need to be very, very aware of how we're interacting with people. Are we being short with them? Are we ignoring them? Are we not being present because we have 10 other things in our mind? All of that stuff. And probably a real good comparison or example of this is, I know I've had it where I've walked into a room and haven't, maybe I'm in a good mood or whatever. You walk into a room and you just know that something's not right. Did somebody die? Like, did somebody get fired? Like, did somebody just get in shit? Like, did somebody just stab another person, or like with a trident, in the chest, Anchorman style? Like, what happened there? So as leaders, we're responsible for that energy. We're responsible for the tone of the team and of the room and of the meeting that we're in. So you have to be very aware of that first and foremost. And you can think you're hiding it, but realistically, the people that work for you or that you support, you can't hide it for very long because they know you. They know you. So that's the first big secret in staying and being confident and calm in a high pressure leadership situation. Be aware of and change your leadership presence. So then obviously, how do we change it, right? Well, we want to use the HALT approach. So we've gone turn tonight. Now we're going to do HALT because, as I said, it's all about practical wisdom with me. HALT method is do not make a decision if you're one of these four things. Whether you're hungry, that's the H. Angry, it's the A. Lonely, that's the L. And the T is tired. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Those four things. HALT, right? Stop. Pump the brakes. Slow down. Do not, if you can avoid it, right? If you can avoid making a big decision in particular in one of those four states, then go ahead and do that. Maybe it's as easy as let's go eat. Let's go have a nap. Let's go revisit this in the morning, whatever that is. So that's the second big secret of being calm and confident in high pressure leadership situations. The reason that's a secret is because it will often avoid putting us in a high pressure or stressful situation a little bit later if we were a little bit more proactive. And I actually use this a lot. This week in particular and other weeks, I've got obviously the Transformational Leadership Program launch going on. I've got some personal challenges with aging parents, so that's weighing me down quite heavily this week. And so it's really easy to feel overwhelmed. And so I think to myself, okay, if I have to do this, do I have to do it now? Because right now I'm either hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Right? Mostly it's tired. So if I'm tired, I try to pump the brakes on that and then start something fresh. Now, of course, reality says you can't always push off big decisions, but wherever you can, use that HALT method. Now, the third one is employ the Defeat the Beast 5-step method that I've come up with. And it's a technique that has served me extremely well and a lot of colleagues and amazing people that I work with. So this is it in a nutshell. First step is recognize that you're having feelings of stress. So awareness is the first key. Second is pause. Pause. Pump the brakes a little bit. Third one is take 2 deep breaths. And not the bullshit, superficial, hyperventilating ones. I know it's kind of funny where if we're responding or I'm responding to some sort of an emergency or some sort of high pressure situation, it could be a corporate meeting as well, or speaking on stage to 1,500 people. I'll walk out of the room. Let's say it's an emergency operations center, like disaster headquarters. I'll walk out of the room, maybe at the end of my shift or to take a break. I take a deep breath, and it literally feels like that's the first breath I've ever taken. Like my chest is like, oh, Hey, nice. We can get all sorts of air in there, because under stress, what you typically do, or what you tend to do, is your breathing accelerates. It's neurological, physiological. It just accelerates. So we have to consciously pump the brakes on that. All right. So recognize you're stressed. Pause. Take 2 deep breaths, and 99.9% of the time, those first steps help and stop that runaway train of stress. But if you're still feeling a little bit anxious, then what we do is we want to go into box breathing. And what box breathing is you breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you breathe out through your mouth for 4 seconds, and then you hold it for 4, and then you just repeat. That's why it's a box. And that, again, it's all about practical wisdom and tactics. It neurologically and physically and scientifically, biologically works. It works. What it does is actually counteracts the runaway train part or system, and it puts the brakes on it, or big, huge parachute, for example. So that's why it works really well. Now, I also suggest don't necessarily start with 4, 4, 4, and 4, because some of you might pass out. So maybe do a 2, 2, 2, and 2. Or 3, 3, 3, or whatever the case is. So those are the 3 big secrets I wanted to just do a quick review on. Now, I also want to share with you a roadmap that I think you'll find kind of interesting. And it looks at, because I recognize that stress management is a part of the leadership equation. Breaking habits, bad habits that don't serve you in your leadership journey, that's important. Creating new habits that serve you well is important, but that's not the only, those aren't the only 2 components. So I want to introduce my Inside Out Leader roadmap, and I'm curious what your thoughts are and where you fit on this particular roadmap, because this, to me, I've designed it such that it's a very deliberate delineation of different stages, and it's not just throwing a bunch of shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's a lot of reflection, a lot of conversations with some super smart people, way smarter than me. And this is what I've come up with. So stage 1 is kind of come as you are. You're doing the best you can with what you've got, little to no formal training and leadership. You act and make decisions based on what feels right. Much of the time is trying to figure out the rules of the game and expectations. Scar tissue learning, so like bad experiences, learning through trial and error, mostly error, and references abound of what not to do rather than what right looks like. And the team is a collection of individuals. So that's kind of the stage 1 where we've all been. And I know when I first started in search and rescue, for example, I was very much in that stage. I was 20 years old. So formal leadership training, of course, none. That's crazy talk. Stage 2 is now where you're starting to get your feet under you. So you're starting to realize that there must be a better way. So stage 2 is increased awareness, and you're seeking out information through HR courses, Facebook, YouTube. And at the end of the day, like your family actually wants to talk, but you're so freaking peopled out, right? So peopled out. Kind of like when I facilitate programs for multiple days, like, oh my gosh, I go back to the hotel room or wherever, and I'm like, I'm out. So stage 2, increased awareness. Stage 3 is taking action and gaining traction. So now you've realized there's an issue. You've done some research. Maybe you're starting to take courses. Now you're actually starting to implement some of the stuff, and you're gaining some traction. So you're feeling okay and you're optimistic. Stage 3 also says that, yes, you begin the employment of some preferred tactics and concepts, and you start to see results, which is really good. You start to see a feedback, right? A positive feedback loop. So what you're doing is working. And you absolutely find yourself more comfortable in high pressure situations using the techniques I just talked about. So those 3 stages are fantastic, but stage 4 is where we ultimately want to get to. Stage 4 is what I consider the inside out leader. And that is somebody that has a great depth of knowledge in the areas of leadership, self-development, and team. You continue to seek improvement in yourself. How does that sound? You are calm. Respect leadership influence is your default. So you respect others, they respect you. And as leaders, that's really, really important for us personally and professionally as well. You are confident, you are aligned. So values, right? Values in particular, what you're doing, how you're acting is in alignment with what is important to you. If we can get there, man, things just start to flow. You are a communicator. So you listen actively, you communicate intent and expectations, all of those things. So those are the 4 stages. And I would recommend, or I would ask that if you're watching it live or on the replay, whatever, figure out where you fit, right? Stage 1 is come as you are, increased awareness. Stage 3 is taking action and gaining traction. Stage 4 is the inside out leader. Now, I'd also let you know that all of us are different elements, right? This isn't just staying in one silo in one stage and saying, yes, I am stage 2. Chances are most everyone is in the 2 and 3 stages, kind of elements of both, maybe a smattering of stage 1 and maybe a smattering of stage 4, or wherever you might be. But suffice to say, where we want to get to, if you look at stage 4, give that a read. That looks pretty good. So that's what I call the inside out leader roadmap. And it's a deliberate success path to get you from here to there. Now, there are like spreadsheets that I've come up with. I have completely nerded out on this stuff. No doubt about it. But the good news is I have distilled a lot of that into the my program here, and that's the Transformational Leadership Program. And it's about accelerating the development of leaders from the inside out. And it's there's nothing like it. There's nothing out there that combines the inside work, the self-development work, things like habits, like we just talked about, or how do we handle high pressure situations? That's inside stuff. Values, our vision for our leadership. So what kind of legacy do we want to leave? What kind of leader do we want to be? That starts on the inside, and a whole bunch of other elements definitely go into that. So we need to figure out leading on the inside first, and then we can start to hit the outside piece. So in TLP, the outside looks like figuring out how to start. So the art and science of difficult conversations and how to start them, because that's typically the most difficult part. Is that causes the most angst, because we're like, oh man, how are we going to start this thing? Like, I got to talk to her, and man, I don't even know where to start. So your stress goes up. But if you have a very good and effective way to open the difficult conversation, then you'll find that using the technique that we're going to talk about, or a couple of the techniques, the person won't dive and go into fight or flight, for example, which is very typical. Like, you suck, you're terrible at blah, 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 or you need to do something. Well, that just drives that person that you're talking to into stress and fight or flight. So you're not going to have a very good conversation. You'll just have what we call verbal ping pong back and forth. Not a very good way of doing business. So we talk about that. And then we talk about meetings and effective one-on-one meetings and setting expectations and a whole bunch of other things that are on the outside that allow us to organize and get people to where they need to be. So it's the combination over 8 weeks, that the inside and the outside, that really creates a powerful learning experience. And it's all about tactics and practical wisdom, right? And I use the analogy all the time of riding a bike. I learned how to ride a bike just like most other people. I didn't know anything about gravity. Nothing. I was 4 or 5, maybe. I certainly was not ripping through the encyclopedias back in the day. Maybe Go Dog Go was pretty popular, the Dr. Seuss book. I may have been up at that level, but I don't think it really dealt with gravity at all, actually. I should probably reread that, but maybe a little bit above my pay grade. But so I learned it without knowing anything about gravity, no knowledge on inertia, no familiarity with how a bike worked. I didn't know any metallurgy or anything like that. So I learned like everybody else. You get on the bike, you have a good coach, which is, for me, my dad. Not always the most encouraging, but that's okay. But you get on there, and trial and error, right? You try some different things. You've got your training wheels on for sure, but after a while, you got to take those training wheels off. And my dad anyways would, stand behind, just like I do and did with my son, Hunter. You're holding the back of the seat and away you go. So nowhere when I was teaching Hunter how to ride a bike did I sit him down and talk about gravity or inertia or any of that other stuff, right? Or like strength. Like, hey, dude, you gotta, like, it's all about leverage. You gotta leverage. None of that. Same thing with swimming, right? Same thing with swimming. I didn't know anything about buoyancy. Yeah, sorry. Maybe I wasn't a smart kid. Maybe you did, but that's not how I learned to swim. And in fact, leadership should be approached that same way. Yes, there's a lot of great information out there, and I contributed to the cause. The body of work, and even in my book, I was trying to be very, very practical and very, very concise. So it's not about lack of academics or theory or anything like that. It's actually, we've got too much. So how do you distill that? How do you get something tactical that you can use in the moment? That's what the TLP is all about, the Transformational Leadership Program. It's about accelerating. So, and one of the questions that often comes up is, how much time am I going to have to dedicate to this thing, man? Like, I'm already overwhelmed. I'm here to tell you, the whole idea of the program is to do as much effective acceleration as possible without taking a lot of time and without the overwhelm. So there's a 1 hour, typically 30 to 60 minute piece of video content that's released Monday morning into our private membership area. Midweek, we hop on a live video call. And by the way, all videos and everything are recorded for you to review on your own schedule. So midweek, we'll do what I call a topic AMA, or topic Ask Me Anything. So we talk about whatever it is that week. So you can ask for clarification or tell about some wins or some challenges, and we can go through that. Then at the end of the week, typically Friday, hop on another video call and we talk about the week, but we also now expand it to what we call course AMA, course Ask Me Anything. And so that's when we have an opportunity to talk about anything that leadership wise that we've covered in the program already. And my experience is, through coaching one person is tremendously valuable, because everyone else can be listening in and probably see some of their situation in the person that I'm talking to, and we're having a conversation. And there's a private Facebook group and all sorts of support around that. So you're not looking at a ton of time. You're not, like, the 30 to 60 minute video, the video call, and the 2 video calls. And they're all recorded, so you can take them at your own leisure. And you'll also have access to what we call the vault. So you can even search all of my electronic content, the podcasts, any presentations, like any of that stuff, search by keyword, and it'll pop right into that video that where we're at. So anyway, so that's the whole idea. So if you're worried about time, I'm telling you, no one got time for take a ton of courses. This is all about practicality. It's acceleration. It's 8 weeks, and it's also a no bullshit approach. Frankly, like it's a great course if you're in momentum and you want to change, and you're willing to change, and you're willing to do some work for it. I'm not going to be spoon feeding you at all. We'll be having some great conversations and some honest conversations. But the reality is if if you had found what you're looking for, sounds like a U2 song, I think, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be watching YouTube videos, I'm sure, and checking Facebook memes and inspirational quotes and all that stuff. So you're here for a reason. And so I would encourage you to check out the page that I just linked up there. It closes, the bonuses for this particular, we start February 24th. The bonuses are expire Friday, so in 2 days. And lifetime access, for example, that's one of the big ones. The 1 hour call and a bunch of other things too. We're going to be switching the combinations up. Program, like I said, starts on the 24th. So it closes midnight Eastern. And so head to that link, check things out. If you have any questions about tonight or anything related to the content or transformational leadership program, leave a question in the comments or whatever it might be, and I'll answer it up. And just remember, you do have to act within the next couple of days to get into our February 24th to take advantage of these particular bonuses. Anyways, thanks for watching. And if you're on the replay, feel free to give a thumbs up, but give a comment too if there's something else that you want us to cover off, or if you found this valuable. Thanks, and have a great rest of the night.